start off by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for the board.
Well, you know, lived in Hayes for 42 years, or all but 3 of 42 years. It keeps growing. I think the first time I did this interview it was 30 years. So you know, I'm a USD 49 product. I went to Roosevelt, Kennedy, the former Kennedy Middle School, and Hayes High. Graduated in 1991. Been on the board for 12 years. Came back here after law school, started working at a law firm here in town, and then just in January started a new firm with my new partner, new old partner, Carol Park, and I were partners at the old firm, and then we decided to go out and do our own thing. It was a difficult decision this year as to whether to get involved again. I knew that there was a lot of stuff that we had started but hadn't been completed, and I wanted to see that through, but with the new office and things, it was, kids getting older, it was going to be very difficult to do, but things kind of have calmed down a little bit at the office and things have smoothed out, and so I made the decision to run, and so here we are again, this is, I guess, my 4th election, and just really I think we've made a lot of changes over the last 2 to 4 years, and some of those dictated by state budgets, some of them internal policies that we've done to streamline the process, or look for efficiencies, and find out ways that we can, instead of wasting money, to put it to use for education. And I think we've done a really good job of that. The hire of Dean Catt was, I think, one of the big steps in that direction. And sometimes I get too tunnel vision on looking at all the problems still ahead, and somebody pointed that out to me the other day, so I kind of reflected on all the things we've changed and improved, and when you look at it that way, it's a lot more encouraging.
And family?
Oh, I have a wife and 3 children. My wife is from here as well. She is a product of the private school system here in town. She did go to Kennedy Middle School when she was in school, and our kids, I've got a 14-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 9-year-old, and they are going to private school. That's not a big secret, and I know that's a lot of people wonder why I'm doing this, or critique and say that I'm doing it to destroy public education, and I don't really think that's what we're trying to do. I think a lot of people may not understand it, but to me, being a product of this school system means a lot to me. It's my alma mater, and I think that I'm not just looking at this for the few years my kids are in school. I'm looking at it from a community aspect of what does this community need in our buildings, not today, but 50 years from today and going forward. And I'm not going to, if I decide not to run again, or I guess ultimately if people decide not to have me, that'll be their decision, but my decision to run or not to run is not based upon whether my kids attend school in one of the buildings. My decision's based on whether I think I can still be useful to the district or to the community. So that's, I think I can, and obviously the voters will tell us so in less than a month here. So,
should the public's desire for neighborhood schools and choice override the cost savings and the educational benefits we've been told are there in consolidating?
Well, maybe. That gets into an interesting discussion. You've sat through a number of the meetings, and you've seen, we've had discussions about buildings anywhere from, I think the Munger discussion came up before you were covering, but maybe you were there when that was on, but that was kind of the same concept of a neighboring school, but with the facility needs, I believe you were at most of those meetings, and we talked a lot about the one mega elementary school, and there's a lot of positive things about that. But the committee obviously didn't think that was, one, sellable, and I think a lot of the members of the committee didn't think that that was the best thing. I think if you look at the numbers and the geographical maps of where the populations are from each individual school, we don't we have buildings in neighborhoods, but they aren't representative of the neighborhood they're in. I mean, there's a lot of people pulling from all over town coming into those individual buildings. So I don't know that we have that, but I think we're, you know, I don't know how you phrase it in this way, but one of the concepts that's coming up is that's most likely going to end up on a ballot in the next couple of years is a bond issue to renovate and improve our schools that are out there. And that falls into that, you know, neighborhood schools. I don't anticipate that that would be put onto the bond where you have an A or B type situation. You want neighborhood schools or you don't. But if that's what people want, then, you know, clearly if that's what they're looking at, then I think that as their representatives, we have a duty to follow through with that, even though we may think personally that some other option is better, or to be one school, two schools, whatever the situation may be. And so that's, you know, the concept when you start looking at that, though, is you know, one common thread you hear from people is we want smaller class sizes. Well, we can't do that now. We just don't have the money to do that unless we start cutting in a lot of other things. And that's something I think we need to look at, and I hope we continue looking at that, because I think if you don't evaluate everything, how do you know, then what you end up with is saying, well, class sizes can grow because that's something we have to look at, but these other programs that we've had for years, we don't always look at that, so it's easier to take the position that, well, I don't want to look at that, and this one I have to. It's kind of like fees, you know, where that comes up every year, and we talk and give lip service to the fact that we put a lot of time into it, but when it'd be interesting if you were running the stopwatch how much time we really did. I don't think we do. I mean, it's and there's not a lot on fees to talk about, but those other things that we talk about that we could do instead of fees, that's where we need to spend our time. I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of got into some other areas, but
and actually those other areas, that's the next question. How would you characterize or categorize art and music and media? Are they classes? Are they extracurricular? And should we pay for those programs?
You know, a lot of this comes up. You know, we've talked about this all gets brought up and discussed anonymously on various different locations and at water coolers. But you know, it started with the whole pay to participate, and it started out as a sports thing. And we've looked at this for, I'd say, probably 6 to 8 years. And we said we did a study, and people will tout that study still that, well, that's going to reduce fundraising. Well, they talked to some people, and that's what people told them. But I think if you really go and look at the other districts in the state of Kansas that have done it, it really hasn't. And you know, the parents I've talked to, and I haven't talked to them all, but those that have kids that play traveling sports that I sit next to, and my kids are doing those things. The question I ask is, if we did, you know, if we got rid of all sports, would you as a parent continue to fund like we do up to a certain level anyway? Would you do that? Absolutely. And so I find it difficult to believe that if you're paying, you know, because right now you pay for uniforms and you pay for everything, right? You know, until they get into middle school, and you pay for travel, and you know, so all those things you're paying, and I know it's expensive, but you know, we looked at the other day the kindergarten issue, and whether we pay or charge a fee of $150 for kindergarten, or you know, is it free? And you know, we talked about the block grants and that argument that can be made, but the reality is the state requires us to have half-day kindergarten. We have full day. And we as a district, one thing I think unanimously, well, not unanimously, but very seldomly did we not, majority of the board agree that kindergarten is so important we are not going to get rid of full-day kindergarten. And so then the question's been, do we charge for it? And last year we did. I was against that. I still am today. But that's a $357,000 in that neighborhood cost to the district. Sports are about $500,000. You know, and I'm not here proposing we get rid of sports. That's just not where I'm at. But you know, those are the costs, and we pay or we charge a specific fee for all-day kindergarten, which studies will show you how important all-day kindergarten is. And we can also get studies that will show you how important athletics are and the team building and those things. So they're both important. But you charge for one, not the other. So back to the art and music thing, which is where you started this, art, I'm not aware of anything in art that you could classify as extracurricular. Music is a different story. I think that's kind of a hybrid, because there are classes, but there are some extracurricular portions of that. So I think you've got to look at that. Now, there is no requirements for sports to get a degree, or I'm sorry, to get a diploma out of Hayes High School or through the Learning Center. And so that changes that dynamic there. The only requirement, I believe, is you do have to have some credit in fine arts, which can be art, music, whatever. And I believe it's 1 credit, if I remember correctly. It might be 2, but either way, it's a small number. So we could scale that way back. I'm not a proponent of that, but I think as we look at courses and things we have available, you've got to take a look at, do we need 6 or 8 different music type programs? Could we deal with, if it's 6, could we deal with 5? If it's 8, could we deal with 7? But not just focus on that music program. I mean, we've got to, the question is, as I see it, is what do we have to have, and then what is extra? And then, then you weight that. How important is fine arts to an education? I think it's very important. I mean, I think the studies will all show you that not only for those kids that are going into those areas, but just to have the music background. I think the studies show that the kids that do that have higher grades and things like that. And I think you can do it on the sports side too. And so what concerns me is we have this pitting of one group against the other. And I think what we need is it needs to be, we're all in this together. It's easy to look at it and say, I'm a sports parent, so I don't think music's very important, we shouldn't do it. Or I'm a music parent and sports aren't.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, I'm not a proponent, just out of hand saying we're going to cut any of that. I'm a proponent for looking at what we have, what we need, and then taking a true evaluation as we look at a budget and say, okay, we're short this. We've got class sizes we think are too big. If we added the staff necessary to get those class sizes to what we want, what's that dollar figure? And then you take that dollar figure and you can look at, and this is when I hammer on the budget, this is why I'm doing it, because when you piecemeal things, if you run the technology budget first and get that approved, and then you try and figure out how you're going to provide for your infrastructure and heating and air and all those things, well, now you're set because you've already earmarked that money for the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years, whatever it might be. So the concept is you look at all at one time, and then you make a budget based on that, and if it's a technology thing that's going to take multiple years to roll out, and it's so expensive you got to pay for it over several years, you may lock up that money for that period of time, but it's a decision you made, educated on all of the factors. And for an education institution, I'm all for being educated. And we know some, but we don't know all. And between the board and the administration and the staff, I think we can know all, or pretty close to it if we all work together. And that's what we've got to do. And I think for years we've had protection. You never want to give up something in your area, and so you want to protect it. And that's normal. And I think when it got to the administrative level, we've had situations in which they weren't willing to make those people make those tough decisions or have those tough discussions. And I think Dean's willing to do that. I'm not saying he's getting rid of anything in education. He may not do it any differently, but he's going to at least have the discussions so we can have the information and then make a decision. So.
Where should we cut costs, or do we need to cut costs?
Well, there's a number of areas that we've got to look at, and when we do that, we start. There's a number of areas you look at and say, well, we rank here or there statewide, we rank here or there nationally. The problem is the national side of it becomes very difficult. Test scores are one that you can compete nationally on, theoretically, but it's really tough to compete with surrounding states on salaries and benefits and things like that, because they have a completely different funding mechanism than we do. And we've been dealt significant challenges from the state, And it looks like those will continue. I mean, these block grants, we've gotten some good news that aren't going to be horrible for us, but it still doesn't address the underlying issue. And so we can't compete there, but we can compete on a statewide level. And I think, when you look at our salaries and benefits, about 87% of our total budget is made up of salary and benefits. So that remaining 13%, or slightly over 13%, we've cut and cut and cut out of that. And there's probably still areas we can do, but we've cut it so much that the only way we can increase that portion of it is through raising fees, and which cuts against the whole concept of a free education in the state of Kansas. Now, I would venture to guess you can't find a unified school district in the state that has a truly free education. And so that concept I guess we've got the support of all the other 286 districts that they're not doing it either. But the problem is that just because they're doing it wrong doesn't mean we should too. And so when you look at our salaries and benefits, and I haven't run them recently, but the last numbers I had, it's tough to look at these. If you want to compare the numbers, you can come up with a number here or there and say, well, we rank really low. And in negotiations, we've kind of run into that at times, where they say, well, for a master's plus 8 years, and so you pick out this one box here, we're way behind everybody else. But, what we found out, and this isn't about teachers, but it affects teachers. I mean, that's just the reality of it, that, we hear a lot that teachers are expected to bear the brunt of all this. Well, of our classified staff, they make up the lion's share of it. There's 300 of them. Administrators, there's a small handful. And so I'm all for administrators pitching in and taking a cut too, and we've done that this year. We've converted administrators from 10-month contracts to 12-month contracts. And now that's not a pay cut, but that means they're doing more work for the same amount of pay. They're going to, if we have changes to the school calendar, we lengthen it out, or we lengthen the day, they're going to have that portion as well, although I don't know if lengthening the day affects them, because they're there usually beforehand or expected to be in there till much later in the day. So those things happen. We've had a number of cuts in pay, and some of those, we've taken a lot of flack about the Randy Gustafson thing, but this year alone, with just 2 recommendations that he had, we're going to save about $65,000, and that's a continuing savings every year. We saved 50 last year. This year it's going to be about 65, and it'll continue to go that way going forward. And that's just in 2 positions we had that were greatly overpaid for their position. Our finance director was about $125,000. We're down to $75. There's $50,000 right there, and it was at his suggestion not to change that position, but the qualifications and the salary range as to where we should be. And then our administrative assistant was, I believe, in the $55,000, $58,000 range, and now is in the $40,000 range. So there's another $15,000 there, and that number is going to be saved going forward. So, we did spend $62,500, or I think that was the max we could have. I don't think we spent quite all of it, but we're getting a return on that investment. So when you look at it, I mean, you're going to have to take a look at benefits. And, the city's doing it. They've done it. The county's doing it. Health insurance is a problem nationwide. I know there's things that are happening on a national level to try and get that under control, but they're not happening fast enough. We looked a year and a half ago that, at that time we could have saved $660-some thousand annually on health insurance for, it was a different company, and so everything's different when you deal with them, and I've heard some complaints about that, and have done my own research on that, and it's the same company the city of Hayes uses, and so I've called their HR director and spoken with her, and just to find out what they're running into, and are these problems real, or is it just the rumor mill? And she advised that they've had some problems getting doctors set up, and the long hold times. But what she has done is she's taken over that role and done it for the employees, and now they've got all doctors in Hayes are set up except for one, And so, I mean, if we would, I'm not proposing we switch to Covenantry, but if we have those options available, then we can look at those. We're one of the only districts in the state of Kansas that the contract dictates the insurance carrier. And, we don't have the choice to look at other options unless we negotiate it. And if we negotiate it and we don't get an agreement, we can go to impasse. But impasse doesn't save us anything because, one, you've got bad PR, which leads to bad morale. But on top of it, they can elect to continue under the old contract. And unless you get everybody switched over, you still have to have, the only thing you're going to be able to offer is the one you have until you can make the switch. And, the city went to that several years ago and have been successful. They've been able to maintain their costs. They did have a jump this year. And, one of the things they're looking at, and a lot of districts have looked at, is capping it at a dollar figure. We can only pay this much per employee. And so we don't have any of that flexibility right now. We've got unlimited accrual of sick time. And the dollar figure, the last cumulative dollar figure was $1.5 million of an unfunded liability that this year we're going to get hit with the anticipated retirees. Is going to be not as bad as I thought, but still a sizable number. And so that we do budget some each year for that, but it's not common in today's workforce, whether it be the school workforce or the private sector. And so those are things we've got to look at. We have an early retiree health benefit that you could retire at 55, and the district picks up your health insurance no matter what cost until you reach 65 years of age or whatever the Social Security age is, or I'm sorry, the Medicare age is, and that's about $350,000 a year. And we a few years back we implemented a 403B plan that was supposed to offset that, but that's money we've been paying out for, I think this is the second year of it, and we've continued to pay that out. And the earliest that early retiree benefit goes away is in 2030. So if you run out the numbers, we're in 2015, that's 15 years from now, and so none of the children in our district are going to benefit fully from that, eliminating that at all. And so we have a whole generation of kids going through that are losing the benefit of those dollars to help their education. If I'm a teacher, this talk about trimming benefits and things like that aren't very friendly, but what the teachers need to understand, we're not their enemies. We're in this together. And if you're a young teacher that's just started in our district, or even a mid-level, you've been here for 5 to 10 years, the hopes of getting a pay raise in today's economy, unless we get substantial increases from the state level, I mean, we're probably looking 10 years before we'll ever be in a position, and even then, I mean, that's assuming some increases in revenues. But there's nothing on the horizon that would allow for any vertical movement. So if you got additional education, you could get that. And there's nothing that's going to be there for horizontal movement, so as you put more years into the district. And there's that age-old problem we've had where hire a new employee that's been in another district for 10 years, but our person's been in our district for 10 years, and they might be at 5 years. The other one comes in at 10 years, and there's a fairness factor there. And I understand that. That's another thing we've got to take care of. But that's why we've got to rein these benefits in. And we've got a very, the state plan on health insurance is the top one that's out there. So we've got we've got to look at, if we can't get off of that plan, can we change which plan underneath the state plan we're under to tweak the benefits or the deductibles and the coverages, and maybe go to co-pays or something like that, to where our premiums drop. And then those dollars, every dollar we get back, it's not like we're taking them home with us, or they're going to cut taxes or things like that. We don't do what the state does. We're going to reinvest them in education. I mean, at some point there'd be so much savings that maybe we would do tax cuts, but that's a very difficult period to see. I can't see that in the future. So, I mean, that's really the areas. We've got to look at pay and benefits. We've got to make sure we're competitive as we replace people that leave. We've got to make sure we bring them in at the right schedule. But our teachers have told us, and will tell you, if you'd ask, that they have the best contract in the state of Kansas. And that's, one of the things that's on there is they have the shortest workday of anybody in Kansas. They have the shortest number of years. And, I think when they've looked at that, at least some of the people that we've been dealing with in these preliminary negotiation meetings or discussions that, I think they recognize that. They understand that. Teachers want to be there for the kids. They want to help the kids. I mean, this concept of how they've been vilified nationally and at the state level is not fair. Sometimes the tactics or the prior tactics they've used to respond haven't been the most effective. And I think as you look at changes at the national level for the NEA, they've changed their message and how they're handling this and trying to get back to what teachers do so well, and that is they help kids. They educate kids. They know how to deal with their needs and address those issues. And as a board member, I know people in other districts, and I hear what other boards do, and sometimes I just cringe, trying to set up and tell teachers how to have a parent-teacher conference and how to teach a class. That's not where we're at. Some of the things we do impinges on that, on deciding on a technology plan or something like that, but I don't think in my time on the board, I've never done it, and I don't know of any other board member that's gotten to the level of trying to tell teachers how to do their job. They may tell them how much money they have to do it with, or what the tools they have to do it with, but that's our job, but they know what they're doing, and that's what we need to make sure we equip them the best they can. And then, as they get for more education, we need to, if we're going to reward that and say that it's important to us, we need to follow through on what we say. But the only way we can do that is if we trim some of those other benefits. I think it's 15 to 20% of our teachers actually take advantage of the early retiree benefit package. So if you look at that, 20% is 60 teachers of an existing class. So we've got a plan that's only 60 people benefit from, but the cost of it takes away from everybody. And so those are the things, and I feel bad for the teachers because I know they're going to have to make some tough decisions when they vote on this too. And I'm hoping we can all work together and look at this. But I understand whenever you're asking somebody to give something up without a lot in return or anything, it's just trusting somebody that's going to get better is tough to do. So, and that's one of the things we're doing with the budget, is trying to be able to put it in writing so we can show what these are going to do. If we do these things, here's what these things are going to mean. So.
And that excuse me, brings me to another question I had in terms of union negotiations. Not so much the state changes, but the board seems to be, excuse me, looking to participate in negotiations, and maybe those are some of the reasons that the board wants to participate, and you'll be looking at some of those things.
Well, we've been kind of all over the map on negotiations from where I started. I mean, it used to be that whoever wanted to show up could show up, whoever wanted to talk could talk, and the board actually, although invited to those, were really not in the process. We'd sit around a table like this, and when we'd get to money, we'd find out at that time, just as the NEA and everyone else, how much money they thought we had next year for pay raises. And that would be handed out, and the board had little say on whether we wanted to add, if we had, I remember one year we had $470,000. And that was about in the time we were talking about teaching foreign language to elementary kids and actually having a teacher do it. And I think the cost, and I might have the timing of it a little off, but I know the cost was about $45,000. And the question always is, well, is that a better benefit than giving a 6% pay raise? And I would argue it absolutely is, because you don't want to underpay teachers, but there's a happy medium in there, and to have a program that's going to teach our kids a foreign language at an early age, which is the time they need to learn it, because that's when they pick it up the easiest, puts our kids so much further ahead. Whether they speak Mandarin or Spanish, those are the two big languages right now. Those are two areas that if they pick those languages up, even if they don't do anything else, they just go work as a receptionist answering a phone or sell fast food. If you're able to speak another language, your value to that employer is higher than if you don't. It's another skill. And if we could teach that to our kids, we'd put them in a better environment to succeed down the road. So that was, those were those days. And then we had interest-based bargaining, which was, we never really followed, and it was, I think we've always had what I would call interest-based bargaining. We want what's in the best interest of the school district, and that includes looking at what's best for the teachers and what's best for the district. And we never really followed it, though. We'd had trainings a couple different times on how we were supposed to do it. We knew how to do it. If we'd get to a tough issue, we'd do it, but not all the way through. We'd stop at step 2 and not get to step 3. And because it's just so laborsome and time consuming that everybody, by the time you get that far, they're like, okay, let's just talk this out. So I think that's kind of been the style. As far as why the board's involved, I think why we did it is just so everybody's exposed to it. One reason is we've got 4 members of the board that are up for their terms are up at the end of this. Only 2 have filed to run. And so we know we're going to have 2 new members, and theoretically we could have 4. And so, initially we were going to have the president and vice president look at it, but those 2 both decided not to run. Now I'm going to be kind of the lead spokesperson on it, which doesn't give me any other power other than just to be the leader talking. And I think that's just because of the years and the knowledge of kind of how we've got to where we're at now. But the board's the one that's making the decision on this. I have only the authority they give me, or through discussions in executive session and whatnot. So, and then the rest of the board will be there to hear it. So they, if I'm not there in July, and it's very possible, it's more than likely that these won't be resolved by then. They could be, but. We haven't yet. I don't know that we've ever been done by July 1 with negotiations. Well, maybe we have, but not in recent years. So and with the tough issues we're talking about, it's probably going to go on a while. And so, I think that allows those people to come in, and I think it also, the last time, it was 2 years ago, we did negotiations. One of the requests was that they wanted the whole board there so they could hear it. And I think there was a perception that we weren't taking back to the board everything, and that they didn't know everything, and that's just nothing further from the truth. We'd go back and report everything, be on our version of what happened. Obviously, we probably have a different slant on it than they did somewhat, but and so that's, we're going to do that. We don't have to, but we want them to know that the board's all engaged. Now, the reality is the whole board probably won't be able to be at every session. It's going to be tough to just get the couple that are going to do a lot of the involvement being there, and everybody else. I mean, the first day the teachers could do it was April 2nd. That didn't work for us. So now it's going to be tough to get this set. So, and we may, depending on the results of the election, may change how this happens. I don't know. So.
But can we expect some of those issues that you talked about in terms of the contract, the insurance, length of days, some of those issues to come up?
Those are all noticed up, and those are all things that one of the things I'm trying to get promoted is, I think a lot of times what happens at negotiations is, although a public meeting, you can report on some of it, but you can't take the whole paper to write, give the transcript of what happened. Even if you did, nobody'd read it, and so what I'm encouraging is, let's record them. Let's put them on TV. Let's let people see what's happening, and we're going to try to do a better job of getting all the information out and making sure that we're not just saying, well, this is the case. We're going to be able to show it. We're going to give you the data or give the teachers the data, and it'll be out there. The goal is not to punish them or do anything like that. The goal is to get our budget in order, and the state said they want us to be more responsible for our budget, and their cuts have made us be more responsible. We can talk at our meetings about how we need more money, and we can go lobby and invite our legislators, and we do those things. I was at the last Eggs and Issues. I'll be at the next one. If I can get the date right, I think it was supposed to be this Saturday, but now it's next Saturday. But I'll be there, and I'll talk with Sue and Boldra, our representative, and Ralph Osmeyer, and tell them my thoughts. But I'm one of hundreds, I'm sure, that have told them the same thing. But we have little control over that, and all we have control over is our internal budget and the 3% we can go add for the LOB, and I think probably should have put it back on the ballot. It wouldn't have cost us anything to add it on there. And I take that back. We have to mail that one out now. So that's you got a drawback there. But I think it's the tough decision is I don't know that the public sentiment's changed any that would change the vote. But that's the only way we have to raise money or a bond. So.
Are you a proponent of long-range planning, and if so,
I don't think you need to ask that, do you?
I know, but perhaps everyone doesn't know.
Well, I think that's been, I mean, if you want to look at one thing that I think's been the biggest part of what we've been trying to focus on, and sometimes we've gotten a little lax about it and go a few meetings and not hammer it home, and then we start hitting it hard again, but it's, this district for too many years has not had long-range planning. And, you know, I think educating people and get them over the fear that, well, a 5-year budget, we can't do that. Well, you have to understand the concept. Your 5-year budget's a goal, a process. That years 2 through 5 may completely change tomorrow because of what the state does. And then you modify it 2 through 5 to reflect that. It's not a guarantee what next year's budget will be. And, you know, I talked to Dean after one of our last meetings where we kind of went round and round about the budget, and I said, you know, you're already doing it. I said, when you come to us and you tell us that we need to shave $288,000 or $151,000 off of next year's budget, you've already got the budget in mind. You're already doing it, but you're doing it backwards instead of the other way. And so, and I think we've made some inroads into that here recently. Capital outlay, we still got a long ways to go, and I don't. Long ways may not be it, but we've got to. Before I vote to support any technology plan, I want to see what the numbers for an ideal technology plan look like, what an ideal HVAC, tuck pointing, whatever issue, you know, all the things we've listed that we need to have done under the Facility Needs Committee and the architects. I want to see if we, you know, what a reasonable time period is that. 10 to 15 years is, I think, the kind of the window I've been told, and it sounds reasonable to me. And so if that's the window of which we really need to be gearing to fix these, then the question is, okay, if we fixed all those in 10 to 15 years, how much money per year? What's the schedule look like? What's the need assessment on, you know, building by building HVAC and electrical and those things? And then, you know, it may be 10 times what we actually have it in a given year to do, and that's okay. So then the next step is you prioritize, and so the only time you can prioritize if you know what all your needs are and the time with which you need to repair them. And it's, you know, we do it at our homes, we do it at our businesses. We probably don't do it at the level we do at a school district, and some people don't do it as well at their homes and you know, overspend. But that's, I mean, we don't get that option here because it happened and has happened, and you know, but for me, and I hope every board member agrees, that we don't get to overspend. We've taken an oath to oversee the taxpayers' money, and that's our primary job, is to spend the taxpayers' money and make sure it's spent for the purpose that's needed, and that is to educate those kids that are in our district. So that's, I don't know if I answered your question on that, did I? Is it
yes,
support bond? Is that the one we're on?
It was the long-range planning, and would you, a part of that is the facilities updating, which you've also mentioned. Would you support a bond?
I think it's needed. I mean, I really do. I mean, you look at, when you start taking a look at school districts and you go around the state, you know, you see what our facilities compare to theirs, and you don't want to get into this, well, we want to be keeping up with the Joneses thing. Because one of the things you run into, and I can't remember if it was Liberal or Dodge City, as we were looking at bond issues, their state aid for their bond issues was 75 cents on the dollar. And so a district like that they have no benefit in even fixing problems. It's cheaper to build a new building and replace it and just mothball or destroy the other one because they're only paying 25 cents on the dollar. Unfortunately, we're too wealthy here, and so we get to pay 100 cents on, or yeah, 100% of the amount. And so, you know, when you look at, you know, if we had a $100 million bond project in that area, we'd pay $25 million locally. I think the taxpayers would jump on board and say, how quickly can we vote this in? But here, when you're paying all 100 million of it, then it looks like a lot different number. And so, you know, I don't know what the right number is on this. I think one of the problems is a psychological problem. The last big bond we had was Hayes High School for a new facility, and that was in 1979. So you look at that, we're almost 40, they're 35 years later, and, it's traditionally a district, when you have long-range planning, you say, look, we have $100 million in needs. Over this bond, we're going to do here, and then we get it passed if the community supports it. And it's not $100 million, you may start at do it $25 million and do this building or these projects, And then when that expires, then you don't just at that time start planning for the next one, but at the time that you pass the first one, you begin your planning that, you go to a Kansas City school, for instance. Got several friends up there in those districts, and they can tell you right now that if 3.5 years from now, the bond's coming up to build a new middle school or high school, whatever it might be, and that's because the districts put out the plan. They have a plan for, here's what our enrollment projections look like, here's what we're going to need to meet those, and here's how, when this bond completes, we jump into the next one. It's a lot easier as a taxpayer if I'm already paying this amount that I don't have to, it was kind of like the county sales tax. It would have been harder to sell if the city sales tax was continuing on, but since theirs had expired for the sports complex, that same half-cent, Now, as you look at a bond issue, we don't have the ability to raise sales tax, but the city or county could for us. And the more logical of those two entities to do it would be the county. How sellable that is with their sales tax is another issue, but when you look at it as a taxpayer, based on where our revenue comes from, we would be much smarter to pass a 1 cent sales tax for the period of the bond. Then about 75% of that money or more, I don't know the percentages offhand, but the lion's share of it would come through sales tax, and very little would come through property tax. And when 40% of your tax is paid by people outside the city, then that's a good thing. Now, those people outside complain about that, but that one, they don't get a vote about it, but two, they don't complain about it when they come and use our roads and our restaurants and our police and fire protection and ambulance service when they're in our town for whatever event it is, whether it be a basketball tournament or come shopping or whatever the case may be. So I mean, and I don't complain about it if I go to Kansas City and do shopping. I mean, it's just the cost of going there and doing business. So I think there's a lot. I support a bond. Do I know that we need $100 million? I mean, I think some of it needs to be the discussion of what do we envision our elementary system looking like? Do we have 4 neighborhood schools or 4 regional schools? I mean, when you start looking at that, you've got 3 of those schools are clustered in one area, and then you've got one kind of on the other side of town. And so, is that really a neighborhood school system anyway? Is it 4 buildings? Is it more? Is it 1, 2, 3? And then there's, even if you have the number of buildings, do you go to a attendance center type thing where kindergarten and first grade are at one building and 2 and 3 are another? I think there was somebody in the facility needs that was a proponent for that, and that can get you some of those savings and benefits that you would have had with the big school. But I don't know the answers to those. I mean, but I do think there's things that need to be looked at. The problem for us is we have just so much on our plate getting our budget in order but I think between July and December of this year, there's going to be a hard look taken at a bond, and I anticipate something will come out of that. I don't believe that the current board makeup it's going to be a $100 million bond, and I doubt. Well, I don't know what the new board members. I mean, obviously you're going to have 2, and if you have 4, I have no idea what they would do, but I think it's going to be tough for them or anybody to. I mean, you don't want to just put it on and have it fail. You've got to put on. You got to streamline your needs down to this just your absolute must-have, and figure out what that is, and then maybe you add a couple more components to it and things that maybe you don't absolutely have to have but you'd really need, and then you try and package that up at a smaller level and sell it, and maybe do that on a shorter-term bond, and then when that's done, or then start planning the next phase and getting back to a system in which we have a regular plan, long-range plan in place on facility needs.
We touched a little bit on technology. Is there anything else that you would like to add there? Or is that an area to save money?
Absolutely it is. and I'm working on some things. You know, I've been, if you know me personally, I have a lot of gadgets and computers and toys and trinkets that, you know, in the technology world, and I usually stay pretty up to speed on that. And you know, I'm the in-house IT guy at my current firm and was at the prior firm, and so you know, I'm not an expert, but I'm really up to speed on it, and so I can appreciate the need and the desire to have those things, but I can also look at it and understand that if I'm buying those things in my business, and you know, it got brought up at a prior meeting about, well, if you were buying something at your office, what would you do? Well, I do exactly what we're asking our people to do, and that is one, I'm going to look at what is it I'm trying to buy. You know, and an example we had, and this has been years ago, but we bought, well, we did it again when we moved to the new office. We did it previous to that when we looked at upgrading the package we had to the next version, and whether maybe we'd be better off going down another road, you know, using different software. But on that, we started looking at, we went to a tech show. We went and saw what was available, or I did, and then we started interviewing those people and talking to them and seeing what was available. And then we did, you know, we got online and researched the software. We did online demos and things like that. And then we ultimately selected a consultant that we felt, you know, was the best one. And then they helped us select the package. We knew kind of the 2 or 3 that were our options, and we picked the package we picked. And then we implemented it, and we made sure we had training. Was a big piece of the implementation, because you can buy it, if people don't know how to use it, it's worthless. And so that's a big component. I don't think our district's done a good job of that ever. I think we're making a couple of baby steps in that direction with what we did, but when I hear that we passed a plan, that's only the first step, and then at the end of the meeting we're talking about, well, when can we get the purchasing side of this done? Well, all the steps that they talked are going to be in between. When do those come in? And you know, the purchasing's the end of it, you know, or towards the end of it. The evaluation and implementation is the end of it, but the purchasing is, I think, steps down the road. So I've got some serious concerns about that. As I did some research with the information we provided the other night, I found a number of options that are substantially cheaper than what's being provided. You know, we're talking about the concept that we don't talk about platforms right now. Although, have we talked about any other platforms other than one? We only bought one to try it, right? Well, that's not I mean, what concerns me is, and you know, I got to make sure my age on the board is not hampering this, but you know, we did this once before when we were mesmerized by one manufacturer, and they got the whole thing. And I'm not saying the product was bad; it was a good product. I own a lot of Apple stuff. I mean, I've got an iPhone now. I've got 2 Apple laptops. I got iPads. My kids are all Apple users. My wife's an Apple user. You know, I like the product, but I also understand how expensive it is. And you know, what is it we're trying to do with it, and what is it we're trying to get out of it? How do we measure that? And then, is it the only option to do it? You know, because if you can lay out, and I don't think we have. I mean, I think we've said globally we want to be better digital learners. Well, what's that mean? You know, I mean, it's like, well, we want to be successful. Well, what is success? You know, I mean, we used the football example a while back. How do you measure success of a football team? You know, one would say, well, wins and losses. If you measure success of a school, you'd say test scores, right? I mean, that's the easy answer, but that's not the only answer. There's other areas that you can succeed. And so the question becomes is, what is it we're trying to accomplish? Do we want to improve scores? If it's just to put a device in their hands so they know how to use a device to learn with, I don't know that that's, I mean, what is the value of that? I mean, I don't think, I'd be hard-pressed to say any kid that goes through our district, whether we put a device in their hands or not, has had no exposure to a device outside of the district. And so there's probably, I'd say 90% or greater that would apply to, maybe much higher than that. And they learn how to use them. You know, you can take an iPad and give it to a 3-year-old, and they'll have it figured out in no time. They may need help figuring out how to turn it on. Once they know, you can't stop them, you know, and often they know how to use it better than an adult does. And so that, I mean, that concept's there. If we just wanted to use it, okay, but is it worth $500 per student every 3 years? I went back and totaled up the numbers, some rough numbers. Since 2003, since we've done this, I would guesstimate that we've got $15 million that we've spent on technology over that 10 years. Now it's 10 years, but about $1.5 million a year. And we do have some equipment in inventory because of that. But I would guess if we put a value on what we have, you'd be hard pressed to get it much over $500,000 current day value. Even the stuff we bought last year, you get 25, 30 cents on the dollar, you're doing pretty good because even though it's new, it's used, And so the question is for that $15 million, what have we got? Where are we at? And that's when, I spent all that time the other night talking about this is, help me as a board member. So when I get accosted at Walmart or wherever I'm at, and parents, I usually can fend for myself pretty well, but when we get jumped by people saying, what is this all about? We can at least defend it. I mean, to me right now, I can't. When we first started with these, we had some better plans for implementation. But that went away, and with the last 2 leases, they were used for word processors, internet portals, and email, and then downloading music and chatting with friends and stuff that we all use our devices for anyway. But the question is at what cost to the district? And that's really what we've got to decide. We've got a plan, and nobody seems to want to ask the question. Or when we do, it's those of us that do, it's you're now the enemy, and the question becomes is why can't we answer those questions? Why doesn't anybody else have that desire to say, is this the only plan? Is this the only device we can get? Do we have to spend $450, $500 a device and buy 3,000 of them at the cost of several $1 million? Or is there, can we, most districts when they're going to go to a new initiative, they roll it out and pilot it, just like we do with other, you were there for the kindergarten thing, that they tried it at one building and the delayed start and all that and how well it worked, and now we're looking at adding it to other buildings. We tried these devices to put them in teachers' hands, but I don't know that we've implemented them in a student-based environment. Do we need one-to-one at the elementary schools? Well, the conversation I get is, as I talk to board members and people, is well, I'm not qualified to answer that question. Well, I don't know that I am either. But who is? And so the question is if you're not qualified to answer, and you've just got to rely upon somebody to answer that for you, what's our role? And so that you may not be able to answer, you may have to rely upon that person, but that person then, if they're so certain in their outcome, should be able to provide to you, here's why we need it, here's what it's going to do, here's how we're going to test it, here's what we're going to have demonstrated to you, and here's how, this is, I challenge you to, it would take you, I had this discussion yesterday on the road back, and I was driving, and the question was, we can't seem to figure out how to evaluate these, right? As I was driving, I typed into my iPad, while somebody was talking to me, the question, how do you evaluate technology plan in school? And in 2 minutes, I had an article from the United States Department of Education on how to do that. And it's followed by a whole bunch of others. The first one's 40 pages. I'm not all the way through it yet, but it's very enlightening. And that's when I get into technology. It's easy when you're out as a consumer, you can get mesmerized by the product and the name. We're not above that, but we should be. I understand the concept that, everybody wants an iPad. They're neat, they're cool, they're trendy, and you can use them. I've got one. I use it for 2 things primarily, work and reading books. And, I'll check email on it periodically too, but those are the things I use it for. When I bought it, it was initially more of a toy than it was a tool. And I've since integrated it to where I don't carry files to court. Everything I have is on an iPad. I take notes on my iPad. And we've made a concerted effort to go paperless. And so you can do that, and those things can happen. And so I'm not saying that it can't be used that way in a school, but the question is it the only option? You know, at my office, I could afford it. If we couldn't, we would have looked at a cheaper option. You know, and that's where I think we're at as a district. And you know, if you've explored all your options and you've come to the realization that the only option is this one option, that's fine. But my concern is I don't want to be told that you've done all that and this is where we're at. I'm not a trusting individual, I guess. I mean, if you've done it, you should be able to show it and prove it. And that's what I think we need to have. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I found a technology plan. Well, hesitant. I haven't brought this into the district, so I'm telling you stuff I haven't told our super yet, but he's going to find out in the next week or so. But one of the software applications that was talked about in the presentation the other night, Mike jumped on and Googled it while I was in the meeting. And my intent was I was thinking, well, it's only available on Apple's, and that's why we're using that. And so I was going to see if it was available on other platforms. And I couldn't figure that out from their website, but what I did find out is they have a tablet that they sell for $69. And then there was a $99 package on there. I couldn't figure it out, so the next morning I called them on my way out of town. And I spent about 5 or so minutes on the phone with the woman that answered and said, you know, where are we at on this $69 thing? Is that a yearly cost? Is that, you know, the device? What are we talking about? No, that's one-time cost you on the device. And I said, well, then what about the software? Well, that's, you know, you get one app, or if you're on the free thing, you know, it basically wasn't as good. But if the teacher's licensed, then you get access to the whole software. There's math, reading, I mean, it's got everything. It's got an administrative console, it's got testing and usage data, a lot of the things we talked about we wanted. And so I said, okay, it's $99 a teacher. I'm going, well, you know, that could be a lot. You know, and this is a K through 8 program only. And I said, well, but I said, let's assume we're just going to use it in our elementary. We've got 4 elementary schools, about 3 sections apiece. That's roughly 70 to 80 teachers. I said, how much? And she said, well, you can license per building at $600, $599 a building a year. I'm like, okay, so you have, even if we did it at the middle school, you've got 5 buildings, that's $3,000. If we did, you know, they're talking that this iPad thing may roll out and be a 6-year project. It's not going to be. They may plan for that, but after 2 to 3 years, they're going to be complaining about how slow the machines are. It may not happen, but I know I just bought a new iPad. It's 2 years. My old one was 2 years old, and that was my complaint. It was slow, and you know, and I probably could have got another year out of it. But you know, I mean, that's what we're going to have, and you know what complaints are now. And so, but this was so $69 per machine. We've got 2,800 students, roughly about 800 at the high school. So if you figure 2,000 of those we would need for K through 8 at $70 a piece, is what is it, $140,000. And if you just figured 3 years of the licensing package at $3,000 each year, that's $10,000. So for $150,000, we could roll out this package and put it in the hands of every student in every building at $150,000. And mind you, we've got, I think they're talking $400,000 is the budget, and that includes money. There's also more money on top of that for other software and things like that. But this Apple thing, you know, if you take 2,000 times 500, what is that, $1 million? And that doesn't include any software. I mean, other than what comes preloaded on the Apple. So you've got $1 million versus $150,000. I ran it by 2 board members yesterday. One of them loved the idea. One of them said, no, that's a horrible idea. I said, how is that a horrible idea? And, you know, I got accused of indirectly being anti, you know, that I don't want any technology skills. I'm like, I just came up with a plan to put it in everybody's hands. But, you know, I'm not in favor of a plan at $1 million to put it in everybody's hands. I mean, to me, that's wasteful. Because I don't think, one, they say it's going to take multiple years to roll out. They don't have a plan. They don't have a software package. They haven't done any of those things to roll it out. This has it all packaged up. Now, if you come back to me and say that software package sucks and we can't use that, then I can live with that. But, you know, $150,000, the first thing was, well, are those tablets any good? Are they junk? What if they only last 6 months or a year? I said, if they only last, let's assume they only last a year. And it's a 3-year plan. We can buy a new one every year and still be much cheaper than what we are now. I mean, you're talking $450,000 versus $1 million. I mean, you're still cheaper. And even if it is, you know, they're all not every one of them's going to die. So that's even not even. So I think the concept is people have already bought. And we're buying iPads. It's just, you know, Apple came in and sold us on it. You know, I don't know if you were around back when they flew 20 board members and teachers and everybody on 2 separate occasions out to Virginia, and they're great salespeople. I mean, look at their stores in the malls. I mean, they've revolutionized marketing in malls. I mean, they do a great job. But, you know, in my research on this, one of the articles I read is, it was an article on the top 10 mistakes that purchasing agents for school districts make when dealing with technology is never let the best salesman be the person that gets the bid. And there's obvious reasons you can, when the cost is so expensive and the shelf life is so short, they're huge financial disasters. So there's a lot to be discussed on that, and I think it will be consuming lots of your time and ours at the next several meetings on that. So,
Common Core, also known as College and Career Ready Standards, it's back in the news again. They're trying at the state level. Your thoughts on that? Should it be scrapped? Should we go back to square one?
Well, you know, Common Core is an offshoot of No Child Left Behind, and, you know, that started, what, in 92 or 94, I think it was. No. It would have been later than that, I guess. But they started in Texas, and then George Bush brought it to the national level, and that was a mistake. And, you know, what it did is it transferred teaching into, we now just teach to the test. It's kind of like an ACT prep course all year long. You know, that's all we're trying to do is teach them the test. And, you know, there are good things about it. I mean, it does make sure that they're teaching the things they should be and not just up there talking. It makes teachers constantly evaluate their curriculum to make sure they're teaching what they should. However, a lot of the complaints about Common Core is that I hear is that, you know, well, we're afraid they're tracking too much data on our kids and things like that, and I mean the conspiracy theory stuff. And so from that perspective, I mean, what I'm not happy with about it is get us something that's based on proven studies. You know, I think we need a nationalized testing system, or at a minimum we need a very good state testing system, because at some point we've got to, I mean, just as we're talking about measuring the effect and output of technology, we also need to measure the effect and output of our teachers. You know, Kansas has mandated that we have provide a free education. I think adequate is the word. So the question is how do you measure whether it is adequate? And the only way you can do that, not the only way, you can't just look at only test scores, but you've got to look at a multifaceted view of how effective it is. And so they need to come up with ways to measure that. Common Core is what it is now. You know, I know that there's problems with it. I know there's things that need to be fixed about it, but the idea that you can just scrap it and start over is not feasible without coming up with some sort of an alternative plan. I don't have that, nor do I have the time to do that with everything else we're doing. But I think it's definitely something we need to stay on top of, and I think we are. The teachers are, but it's, you know, it's going to have the net effect. I think last year was the first year, maybe it was the second year. But you know, that it went in and the test scores relied upon it, and so I think statewide the test scores went down. And so the question is do they bounce back now that we've had a year to look at it, or do they, you know? So that would be the question too: is are we, you know, we need to measure ourselves as to how effective we are in meeting that system. I mean, it kind of goes back to state funding. You know, you know, whether we like it or not is pretty much irrelevant. I mean, we can complain about it, but at the end of the day, you've got to roll up your sleeves and figure out how you're going to work within the system you've got. And that's what we've got to do.
That's all the questions I had. Is there anything else we didn't cover that you think is important?
You know, one of the things I think is really important is, you know, just as I guess my campaign speech, if anything else, but I mean, you know, I think my knowledge and history on the board is, you know, I mean, I think a lot of people know that I've been on for a while. It probably works against me as well. You know, there's a push nationally to get rid of incumbents, and you know, I understand that. But you know, I think if you ask any board member that's been on or that's currently on, the volume of information we deal with in a given year or over the course of a term is amazing. And I don't think that a board member becomes very adept at what we deal with until probably after their first term in office. So you're looking at 4 years, 3 to 4 years at a minimum before you've got comfort with the budget, you've got comfort with all the different facets of things we do. And right now, with James and Marty choosing not to run, they're just at their 4th year. And you've got 3 other board members that are at their 2nd year. And I think they're picking it up. Obviously, they understand, but there's always, we get through meetings and stuff, and there's always stuff that that comes up and things like that. We've got a new administrator that also has been there a couple of years, and not quite 2 years, and so he's very knowledgeable in management, but the history of the district and whatnot, and how we got to where we're at. I think if we, it's going to be a big change for the district. The problem when you come in as a new board member, and I've watched a lot of these interviews, and when we had most of these people that are running, I think all but one interviewed for the position that board member Rankin had received, and when you look at that, the question is everybody's, they want to do better, and maybe your questions have got to more breadth on this, but it's the actual things that we're going to do and change and fix and how that's going to happen. It's a lot more difficult to fashion that plan from the outside looking in. It's very difficult to fashion that plan on the inside, having the ability to vote and do something about it. So I think I think that the leadership aspect, although we've got very good district leadership in Dean Catt, I think that on the board side of it, I think that I bring a lot to the table in that regard, and continue to do that. Even if nothing else, just to, from the history aspect of it, of how we got to where we're at now.